There's a strange quiet that comes just before something ancient begins to break. Not in the world outside you, but in the architecture of your inner map. It doesn't announce itself with noise. It hums. It vibrates. It flickers at the edges of your perception like a signal you almost forgot how to receive. You may not even know what's shifting yet, only that something in you is tired of trying. And that tiredness is not defeat. It's invitation. Can you feel it? That weariness that doesn't just come from action, but from the constant reaching. The stretching forward into timelines that always seem just one vibration away. The subtle ache of performing joy, alignment, gratitude. Because someone told you that's how you attract what you want. There's a fatigue in the soul that no rest can solve. Not because you're doing too much, but because you're trying to become what you already are. You're efforting toward a reality that doesn't need to be pulled toward you, only remembered, embodied, and allowed. Somewhere along the journey of awakening, you were told that you attract your reality. That if you could just calibrate your frequency correctly, hold the vision, feel the emotion, stay consistent, then what you seek will find its way to you. And so you tried. You meditated, visualized, journaled, aligned. You chased alignment the way you used to chase achievement. And at first it felt like freedom. But slowly, the weight returned. Not in the same form as before, but in subtler ways. A tightening. A pressurized stillness. A quiet panic beneath the smile. As if life had turned into a game you didn't know you were still trying to win. Have you noticed how even spiritual practice becomes performance when it's driven by lack? When the intention beneath the alignment is still effort, still not yet, still not quite there. You may have done everything right and still felt like something was missing, like reality was delayed, distant, or indifferent to your inner work. And so you doubled down. You said affirmations louder, you trusted harder, but inside, something started to crack, and maybe that's why you're here now. Not because you need another technique, but because the old framework is dissolving. The model of manifestation that said, if I vibrate right, it will come, is disintegrating. Not because it was wrong, but because it was partial. Because there's something deeper, something more immediate, something so simple the mind overlooks it, and so vast, the body feels it before the words can catch up. What if nothing is actually being attracted to you? What if you're not pulling anything closer, but rather collapsing into the timeline that already matched who you've quietly become? What if the process isn't linear, but quantum? Not a journey toward, but a falling inward. There's a version of you that already lives your desired reality, not far away, not years ahead, but here, vibrating now, just beyond the density of trying. That version doesn't need to attract anything. It simply is the frequency that makes a particular timeline real. And your only task, if it can even be called that, is to become still enough to let the collapse occur. Like a waveform choosing to become a point. Like a signal finally finding resonance in the silence of your being. This isn't about giving up. This isn't about giving up. It's about giving way. Letting go of the idea that you must summon, pull, or perform your way into alignment. Alignment doesn't need to be earned. It needs to be relaxed into. You don't have to reach the version of yourself who has what you want. You are already vibrating in some range of that field. But you can't access it while gripping onto the version of you that believes manifestation is still a task. Can you sense the difference between reaching and remembering? Between striving and surrendering into a new structure of being? It's subtle, but when it lands, it changes everything. Not just how you move, but how time bends around you. How events line up differently. How people respond without effort. How clarity arises uninvited. Because suddenly, you're not a magnet anymore. You're a collapsed waveform. A living, vibrating permission slip for a version of reality that was always waiting for your coherence. So let this moment be less of a beginning and more of a soft rupture. A crack in the scaffolding of the old paradigm. Let yourself not rush into understanding. Just notice what breathes differently now, what loosens, what no longer needs your grip to stay in place. Because what's real doesn't need to be held together. It holds you when you let go. And maybe, just maybe, all you've ever needed was this pause, this space, this breath, where the chasing stops and you finally collapse home. You wake each morning and slide into a posture you hardly notice now. A subtle forward lean toward everything you think still lies ahead. The body memorizes this angle, shoulders tilting into tomorrow, breath reaching past the ribs, as if the only safe place to stand is somewhere further on. Have you noticed how even your gratitude lists secretly point forward? Thankful, yes, but always thankful, so that more can pour in. The engine behind the smile keeps whispering, "Not yet. Keep going. Stay magnetic." Somewhere along the path of self-discovery, we were taught to become cosmic fishermen, casting emotional lures into the quantum sea, hoping our perfect catch would surface if the bait glowed brightly enough. So we polished our feelings, rehearsed elevated states, and called it mastery. But can you feel the strain beneath that glow? Like holding a grin for too many photographs. The face smiles, yet the jaw aches. This is the fatigue no one posts about. The exhaustion of curating vibration. What if I told you the universe never asked for that performance? That the law of attraction you memorized in workshops was only a child's sketch of a much wilder mural. Reality is not a dog you whistle home with affirmations. Reality is a probability field flowering in every direction, waiting for the observer to collapse into one blossom by the simple act of being true. Trying to pull the flower closer only proves you haven't noticed you're already standing inside the garden. Can you feel the dissonance when desire turns into surveillance, checking your mood, auditing your thoughts, fixing any frequency falter before the quantum police issue a citation? Manifestation becomes management. Joy becomes bookkeeping. Life shrinks to a spreadsheet of energetic assets and liabilities, updated hourly in the background of your awareness. No wonder it's hard to breathe. Have you ever watched sunlight spill through a window in late afternoon? The dust particles float, suspended, perfectly still, until a shift in current makes them dance. They don't attract movement. They become movement by surrendering to the unseen flow. What if your life is like that, waiting not for a louder wish, but for a quieter willingness to be carried by currents already in motion? The mind, programmed for linear progress, rebels. If I'm not attracting, how will anything change? Yet deep down, another voice replies, softer than thought, older than effort. Everything changes when I stop insisting it must. That voice isn't complacent. It's creative in a language the intellect forgot. One where stillness is not stagnation, but superposition, pregnant with every outcome until observation chooses. Feel into the paradox. Willpower built the bridge that got you here, but it cannot carry you across the quantum gap. The muscles that clench reality into place are the very knots that keep new timelines from unfurling. What does that loosening feel like in your system? Perhaps a quiver in the solar plexus, a sigh you didn't authorize, a single tear that doesn't know why it's falling. Honor those micro-collapses. They are the first bricks tumbling out of an architecture that never truly fit your infinity. So this is the tired geometry we are ready to retire. The triangle of goal, effort, reward. A shape of straight edges and hard angles, where destiny is dragged along a line segment toward the apex of arrival. The quantum field is circular, spiraling, fractal. No apex, no away. You are not a point traveling. You are a pattern unfolding. The sooner that truth lands in your bones, the sooner fatigue turns into fluidity. Let the old lesson exhale through you now. Attract, achieve, acquire. Let it drift like smoke from a candle finally blown out. In the dim afterglow, notice the room remains. The furniture of existence hasn't vanished. The field did not abandon you when the incense of forced positivity stopped burning. Instead, space just widened, humming with possibilities that never needed your coaxing, only your coherence. And in that widened silence, a new question waits. If I don't have to spend my life pulling tomorrow toward me, what new direction might my energy take? Downward, perhaps, into roots, inward, into presence, or everywhere at once, into the quantum sphere, where effort dissolves into inevitability. Your answer will not arrive as a concept. It will arrive as a felt sense, a gravity soft and sure, guiding you not forward but deeper, where attraction ends and collapse begins. What if the whole premise of attraction is backwards? What if you're not a beacon summoning particles from the void, but a presence collapsing infinite waves into a moment that mirrors your essence? Sit with that. Let it vibrate through you. The shift is small on the surface, but tectonic underneath. It's not, I attract what I want, but I become still enough for what's already mine to materialize. It's not about creation through chase. It's about recognition through coherence. Quantum mechanics doesn't operate in linear cause and effect. It operates in probabilities. Every version of reality already exists as a wave, a vibration, a potential. These waves don't rush toward you like obedient wishes. They wait for you to choose. Not through thought, not even through feeling, but through being, through collapsing into one version of yourself so completely, so irreversibly, that the field has no option but to respond in kind. Have you noticed how the things you tried hard to manifest often felt slow, scattered, or just out of reach? But the most aligned shifts, the moments of strange grace, seem to appear the moment you stop demanding them. That's collapse. That's what it means to become an observer so coherent, so still in your frequency, that a probability becomes a certainty. Not because you earned it, but because you matched it. Can you feel the humility in that? The surrender? There's nothing to fight for when you realize the version of reality you seek isn't far away. It's here, unfolding next to you, within you, above you. But to meet it, you must release the self that's trying to make it happen. That self is constructed from effort. It lives on delay. It survives by the belief that there is always somewhere else to be. But collapse doesn't occur in delay. It occurs in now. The quantum field doesn't speak English. It doesn't understand goals or urgency. It only responds to one thing: coherence. And coherence isn't excitement. It's not motivation or hyperpositivity. It's not peak emotional performance. It's internal clarity so honest that the illusion of waiting shatters. It's the silence beneath the thought, the body without tension, the choice that vibrates I am this now, even before the evidence shows up. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt something shift inside you? Not emotionally, but geometrically? Like your inner edges softened and time slowed and space became less about distance and more about density. That's what it feels like when you enter the vibrational threshold of collapse. Reality doesn't rush in. You fall inward. The room doesn't change, but you notice something you couldn't before. A quiet echo, a new texture in the moment. You've landed. No one teaches you how to feel this, because it's not a technique. It's a return. And returns can't be forced. They happen when the signal stabilizes, when the performance drops, when the self who wanted something gives way to the self who already is. That's the paradox of collapse. You don't move, you are moved. What does that shift feel like in your system? Is it the loosening in your spine? The sudden breath that arrives without effort? The melting behind your eyes when something long held lets go? These aren't spiritual results. They're gravitational shifts. They are the body's way of saying, you've dropped into resonance. You're no longer signaling from absence. You're living from within the form of what you used to seek. And this is the secret that attraction theory never told you. Collapse doesn't need your push. It needs your presence. The field isn't watching your emotions like a gradebook. It's listening for alignment. And alignment doesn't sound like joy on command. It sounds like truth. It sounds like yes, even when that yes is quiet, ordinary, or unexplainable. Especially then. This is why you can't manifest something that's truly not for you, no matter how many affirmations you repeat. Because collapse won't fake coherence. The field only gives form to the you that's real. Not the one you hope to become, but the one you finally stopped resisting. That version is already pulsing in some pocket of possibility, waiting not to be attracted, but chosen. So, feel the invitation now, not to do more, but to dissolve deeper. Not to raise your frequency through effort, but to settle into the one that's been calling you back. Reality isn't summoned, it's selected. And the selection happens not by words, not by force, but by the steady gravitational honesty of this is who I am now. And when that alignment stabilizes, when the chase ends, when the performance melts, when the truth of your being no longer wavers, the field doesn't delay, it doesn't test, it reflects, instantly. Because collapse is not linear. Collapse is recognition. Collapse is inevitability. And that inevitability was never earned. It was only remembered. There comes a moment in the quiet, when the trying dissolves, not in failure but in futility. A subtle knowing enters your chest, not as a conclusion, but as a vibration. I've been looking for something that was never missing. It doesn't shout. It doesn't convince. It just settles, like dust after an earthquake. And in that settling, something extraordinary happens. You realize you've spent years trying to get what you already are. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror, not adjusting or judging, but just seeing? And suddenly the face staring back isn't just familiar, it's ancient. As if every version of you that tried, suffered, succeeded, broke, and rose again is still there, inside the stillness of your own gaze. That's collapse, not a concept. A direct, embodied arrival into a version of yourself that no longer needs explanation. The field isn't responding to the noise, it's responding to that. So the real question isn't, how do I attract my future? It's, which version of me am I willing to collapse into right now? Not one day, not after I heal more, not after I journal more. Now, the quantum field doesn't discriminate between big and small desires. It doesn't filter by worthiness. It filters by signal. That signal is the harmonic between your identity and your embodiment. Not the identity in your mind, but the one your nervous system believes, the one your posture tells, the one your presence transmits. So let's be honest. Are you still asking the field to mirror a reality your body doesn't yet know how to hold? Are you asking for peace, but vibrating tension? Calling in abundance, but clenching around control? Wanting love, but gripping tightly to the mask of not too much? These aren't moral failings. They're simply incoherences, and the field won't collapse until you resolve that frequency split. Not with force, but with full body yes. Can you feel what it would be like to be the version of you who doesn't hope they're aligned, but knows it, because nothing in their system is pretending anymore? That's the moment the wave collapses. Not because you said the right words, but because you stopped fracturing your signal. You relaxed so completely into truth that the future had no choice but to synchronize. The collapse is not dramatic. It doesn't demand fireworks. It usually feels like a quiet shift in temperature, a softening in the spine, a silence behind the mind that wasn't there before. Something ancient falls off, not with a scream, but with a sigh. Like a version of you who's been holding the controls finally sets them down and whispers, "I don't need to drive this anymore. I already arrived." And here's the strange beauty of collapse. The moment it happens, there's no celebration, because the self who would have celebrated no longer exists. You've become someone who simply is what they once wanted. There's no gap to close, no story to repeat, no ritual to keep doing. The bridge disappears the moment you cross it. So if the old paradigm was built on getting there, the new one is built on being it. And being doesn't mean pretending. It doesn't mean faking high vibes until the universe takes the bait. It means anchoring, grounding, relaxing so deeply into your chosen identity that your environment begins rearranging itself. Not because it's responding to your desire, but because it can no longer hold a reality that contradicts your signal. What if you stopped calling it manifestation and started calling it magnetic collapse? What if you stopped asking the universe for proof and started becoming the evidence, not as a performance, but as the most natural, effortless expression of what's already true in you? This is why you can't collapse into a reality while simultaneously negotiating with your doubt. Doubt fractures the wave. Negotiation dilutes the field. You collapse only when there's nothing left to question, when you stop checking for results and simply reside. That's not passive, it's the most potent frequency on Earth, the unmoving center of already done. So breathe, not to calm down, but to return, to sink, to soften into the version of you who no longer identifies with the struggle of becoming. Can you feel them nearby? Not in the future, but in the frequency, hovering just beneath the surface of trying, waiting for you to unclench, to stop scanning, to let go. Not of desire, but of delay. Reality is not arriving. You are. And the only thing collapsing is the illusion that you ever had to chase it. It doesn't come with a bang. It comes with a breath. One you didn't realize you were holding until it releases itself. Collapse doesn't announce itself like a goal achieved. It doesn't come with fanfare or finish lines. It's more like a moment you didn't know you were waiting for. A subtle hum in the body that says, "We're here now." No one sees it happen, but you feel it. Like stepping into a room you didn't build, but always belonged to. And that's the thing. Collapse is not movement outward. It's recognition inward. The shift is not in what the world does. It's in what no longer pulls on you, what no longer triggers grasping or flinching, or the need to perform alignment. The loop's quiet. The proving pauses. The urgency lifts. And beneath it, a deeper rhythm emerges. One that was always pulsing beneath the noise, waiting for you to hear it again. Have you noticed how strange the silence can feel when it first arrives? Not the absence of sound, but the absence of striving. When you're so used to chasing timelines, stillness can feel almost threatening, like something must be wrong if there's no tension to fix. But can you let yourself rest in that discomfort? Can you feel what begins to rise when effort drops? The body knows before the mind. Before you even have language for it, the nervous system starts to shift. Less bracing, less scanning, less compensating. And it's not because something manifested. It's because the identity that needed to chase that manifestation dissolved. And what remains is not a spiritual achievement. It's a re-inhabitation, like returning to your own bones after years of floating outside them. The thoughts may still pass by, the feelings still rise and fall, but you're not held hostage by any of it. You've landed somewhere more fundamental, below the story, beneath the habit, inside the hum of now. What does that feel like in your system? Not as a metaphor, but in the physical. Can you feel the way your hands unclench, the softening at the base of your neck, the absence of pressure where anxiety used to sit like a stone? These are not small things. These are signals, not from the mind, but from the field. Confirmation, not in language, but in coherence. This is the paradox. Collapse isn't a moment of attainment. It's the vanishing of the part of you that thought something still needed to happen. It's the silence after a long song of trying, where even the echo chooses not to linger. You're not excited. You're not overwhelmed. You're not even grateful in the performative way that tries to speed up the next blessing. You are simply with yourself, with what is, with the pulse of a timeline that no longer resists you. And when you walk through life from that state, things rearrange. Not because you cast a new spell, but because you stopped contradicting your frequency with resistance. People feel it. Situations respond to it. Doors don't open because you push harder. They open because you've stopped blocking them with an outdated identity. This is when miracles stop being surprising, because they're no longer miracles. They're mirrors, echoes, unavoidable consequences of your coherence. And coherence, once stabilized, doesn't need confirmation. It doesn't pace or peer through the curtains. It simply remains rooted, unapologetic, inevitable. You are no longer calling your reality toward you. You're walking it, breathing it, touching the textures of a timeline that used to live only in your vision board. And yet, there's no ceremony, because there's no gap anymore between vision and embodiment. They collapse together the moment you stop splitting your presence across imagined futures. And now, when you speak, the words come from somewhere deeper, not from the script of "I'm getting there," but from the resonance of "I am this now." Not because you said so, but because you became so. So let yourself be quiet here. Let yourself not rush into understanding. There's nothing to analyze, only sensation to trust. You don't need to explain this state to anyone. You don't even need to hold on to it. Just stay honest enough to keep dissolving into it. That's all the field ever asked. Not for perfection, not for high vibes, but for resonance. Collapse happens, not when you earn it, but when you stop postponing who you already are. And that moment, it will never be loud, but it will always be true. It was never about learning something new. Not really. Not when the deepest shifts feel more like recognition than revelation. When collapse happens, what floods in is not a sense of achievement, but a kind of remembering. As if a door in your chest swings open and you find a room you lived in before time began. You don't walk into a better version of yourself. You come home to the one that was always here, under the noise, under the narrative, under the name. Have you ever felt that flicker when something someone says, or a line from a book, or a moment of complete stillness pierces you, not as information, but as confirmation? Like a tuning fork in your ribcage was struck, and the sound is older than your thoughts? That's what happens when you stop seeking reality and let it find you through frequency. You're not decoding life. You're resonating with the part of it that already knew. And that knowing doesn't live in your intellect. It lives in the quiet, lived memory of what it feels like to already be. Not to chase, or to fix, or to manifest, but to exist in a timeline so naturally aligned with your being that effort becomes irrelevant. The illusion was never that you didn't have what you needed. The illusion was that you had to reach for it. The spiritual path often disguises itself as a ladder, even as it speaks of oneness. You climb from trauma to healing, from lack to abundance, from ego to higher self, as if the soul moves in steps. But what if you've never been moving upward, only peeling away the layers that kept you orbiting around what was already inside? Collapse doesn't take you somewhere new. It takes you nowhere, deeply, intimately, undeniably. What does that feel like in your system? When you're no longer moving towards something, but resting inside something that includes all movement, all stillness, all outcomes. When the striving self dissolves, and what remains isn't empty, but vast, quiet, and fiercely alive. In that space, you don't have to repeat affirmations. Your cells are already singing them. You don't have to visualize your future. You're breathing it. You don't have to ask the universe for signs. You are the sign. For yourself, for the world, for the field that can now mirror your clarity without interference. And yet there's no rush, because this state doesn't demand anything. It doesn't ask you to speak or share or shine. It simply invites you to live, not perform, but live, as the version of you who is no longer in resistance to what they've always known. That's the kind of frequency that reshapes timelines, quietly, Authentically, completely. The collapse is not just the end of striving. It's the end of pretending you don't already know. It's the end of looping through old questions you've already answered in the silence of your own being. And once that loop breaks, the spiral begins. Not upward, not outward, but inward. Into the spiral center where everything that ever felt far away is here. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful awakenings don't feel like breakthroughs, but like soft dissolves? Like the final grain of sand slipping through your fingers, and suddenly you're lighter. Not because something was added, but because something old was finally allowed to fall away? That's collapse. That's remembering. That's return. And in this return, there is no need to start over. No need to explain. You are not re-entering the world as someone new. You're letting the world meet the part of you it forgot existed. The part that doesn't need to hustle or earn. The part that transmits reality without trying. The part that never stopped vibrating, only waited for you to hear its signal again. Let yourself listen, not with ears, but with your breath. Not with logic, but with your stillness. The memory is in the field. The knowing is in your bones. The real shift is not happening in your mind. It's humming through your spine, softening your gaze, recalibrating your walk. You are not aligning with a timeline. You are the timeline, chosen, embodied, and finally, remembered. There's nothing left to force, no final thing to get. If you felt the shift, even quietly, then it's already happening. The wave has begun to fold, not because you did everything right, but because something in you stopped running. And when the running ends, truth has room to breathe. So don't rush to hold this with your mind. Let it live in your body. Let it speak in how you sit, how you breathe, how you enter a room without needing to be anything but what you already are. You don't need to capture this in words. You only need to stop shrinking from the version of you that no longer negotiates with doubt. The version that doesn't announce itself loudly, but carries something unmistakable: clarity without contraction. This isn't about staying high vibe. This is about becoming so fully congruent that no vibration in you contradicts what you already know to be true. This knowing doesn't need energy spikes. It doesn't need proof. It doesn't need to work. It simply exists, as a hum beneath the noise, vibrating in quiet inevitability. Can you feel that inevitability anchoring itself now? Not through effort, but through your willingness to no longer postpone it. You don't need to hold it. You only need to live it. Not as a peak experience, but as your new base frequency. And that's the shift. That's the invitation. That's the collapse. Let yourself be the one who stopped trying and started transmitting. Let coherence become your language. Let silence become your proof. Let being be enough. Because it is. If something inside you stirred while reading this, not just as a thought, but as a vibration you didn't expect to feel again, honor that. You don't need to explain it. Just stay close to it. Let it reshape you, not all at once, but moment by moment, breath by breath, frequency by frequency. And if you want to keep remembering who you truly are, not through more effort, but through deeper alignment, then stay connected. Subscribe to this channel to receive more transmissions like this. Like this video if it resonated somewhere beyond thought. Share it with someone whose system might be ready to collapse into clarity. And turn on the bell so that you're here when the next remembering begins. Thank you for being here. Thank you for remembering, not as a lesson, but as a lived frequency.